I'm Andrew Kappel, the host of the Leader Leverage podcast. On this show, we'll talk to revenue leaders, company executives, and entrepreneurs to hear how they unlock go-to-market leverage. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to an episode of the Leader Leverage podcast, where we talk to leaders and listen and learn how they unlock go-to-market leverage in their business. So today we're talking to another big guest. We'll be chatting with Chris Walker, another transplanted Austinite. Adam Robinson was one of our initial guests, so really excited for this next one. And Chris, why don't immediately let's kick it off. How, when, and why did you get into leadership?
Hey, Andrew, great to be on the show. Love the concept of leader leverage, especially when it comes to go-to-market. I got into leadership, I would say, like kind of by accident. I started my first company called Unifying Labs in 2019. Thought I was going to be a solo consultant, try to make $1 million a year, have no cost, invest in real estate, call it a day. And as I started to execute against the business plan, I got to $1 million pretty quickly and was like, wow, I think we can take this a lot farther. And had also kind of put together a new way to think about marketing at that time. And when you bubble it up, it's really a new way to go to market. How do you get your customers aware so you can acquire customers for less expensive? And attracted a lot of people that wanted to learn about that concept. And people that joined my company from 2019 to 2022, 2023 dramatically accelerated their careers, going from a manager or a senior manager to a VP or a CMO in 2 years. And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the talent that has been able to grow and develop and working with the businesses that I've been working on.
Curious, Chris, so you started off as a solo consultant. You were publishing on LinkedIn, sharing your learnings, and you found product market fit or service market fit. Did you immediately find service market fit just based on some of the frustrations that you had when you were an in-house employee and just saying, I'm going to go and fix this? Or did you try a bunch of things that didn't work and then you found yourself with something that really worked?
It took around 18 months from when I started the company to when I feel like I had problem market fit. I clearly was able to illustrate the problem. We had a service that was able to address that problem, and we knew exactly who it was for. I think it took about 18 months to get there. So at the beginning, it was just hourly marketing consulting. Whatever you need, CMO, will help you out doing that. Ads, content, website, product marketing, messaging, customer research, whatever. And then over time, you start to see patterns in customer problems and how people respond to the problem, and that there isn't really a solution to it. In that process of building a service business, people that are quick, like at my second one, Passetto, we've been able to get there in about 9 months. So about twice as fast as my first company. When you really understand an industry, like I've recognized this as a problem for a long time. So it took us about 9 months to really formalize it.
Cool. I'm curious, looking back at Refine Labs and then more recently with Passetto, what are some of the leverage points that you've seen, like the light bulb moments where when we're selling services or consulting, like it's about the problem that you're solving and making sure it's an executive level priority, whether it's CFO, owner, CEO, things like that. Any of those aha moments when you're like, oh, wow, I didn't think that this would be a big thing, but this is actually why people are buying big transformational service packages or are immediately signing up for your consulting?
Yeah, I think this probably applies across the board, but I think it's incredibly high leverage in the early stage is go out and listen to your customers, talk to your actual customers. What value are they getting from the service or product? How long did it take? How do they describe what you did for them? So being able to take that insight from your current customers that are experiencing that and then be able to layer that back into the sales and marketing messaging and test and iterate. So being able to see that whole spectrum, but really listening not necessarily to the market, but to your actual customers that have gone through that process, a way to refine the problem that you solve and the messaging around it. I think that becomes an incredibly high leverage point in the early stage. Additionally, being really clear on who you're getting the feedback from. And so if you look at the journey across the board, but especially at Passetto, if you talk to a CMO versus a CFO, what they value, how much budget they're willing to spend, different things like that are dramatically different than between those two people. If you look at an early stage company versus a mid stage company that has a problem with unit economics versus a mid stage company that has a problem with growth rate, all three of those different companies will give you a different answer in terms of the value that you've been provided and the problem that you solve. And so a huge leverage point through this work of customer research is actually identifying this is the customer, this is the problem, these are the other options or the status quo, and being able to really dial that in. I think especially in services businesses, most services businesses never get there. They're not solving a specific problem that they've gotten through market research and working with customers. They're just selling commodity sort of time or work.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, Chris, why Passetto? You had Refine Labs running; it was going pretty well, and now you're still involved with Refine Labs, but now you're doing something else.
Yeah, Refine Labs is still going very well, and Megan Bowen has taken over and done a great job, and that company is doing great. And so the reason that I started a new company, Passetto, is because Refine Labs dominates the marketing department, and the marketing department can't fix the problem that we solve at Passetto.
Yeah.
Point blank.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Leveling up.
And so,
leveling up.
For a while inside of Refine Labs, we tried to bubble up this problem and solve it through the CMO. It failed every time.
Yeah.
99 out of 100 times it failed. And it wasn't because the product or the service wasn't good. It was because we were bringing it to the organization through the wrong stakeholder.
Yeah.
So we needed a new company and a new brand, and being separated allowed us to see that very quickly that I hadn't seen for years working on it when you're stuck in that ecosystem. And so a big learning for me, your first company doesn't have to be your only company. Your first company doesn't have to be your biggest company. You can still own a company and not operate or work in it, which is another learning as an entrepreneur that I think people don't appreciate. I think a lot of people appreciate that I'm a majority shareholder, so I have to be the CEO. That was a big learning for me. And additionally, it's a huge leverage point as an entrepreneur to take a business that's producing cash flow, that has a clear plan, put someone else in charge, buy back all your time, and then go work on a new venture that might have larger upside, larger enterprise value, something like that. And so those were I guess the key rational points from the market perspective and from my own personal perspective.
Yeah, really interesting. I came up in the SDR, enterprise SDR outbound motion, and like we could see, I could see issues. A company that I was at for over 5 years had an amazing run, SDR to enterprise AE to global manager. I relocated from outside New York City to London to build out international team, and then a new CEO came on board and had me build out. They moved the headquarters from Connecticut to Salt Lake City, so then moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. So just learned so much over 5 years. And during that time, there were 4 different CMOs, and a couple different CMOs bought the same marketing content platform that I'm not going to name, and it got implemented 0 times. And finally, after 5 years, I said, like, I'm seeing the same patterns, the same issues and mistakes. Are you not even talking to or seeing what didn't work before? You're just following the same playbook. And so by that time, I had to go do my own thing. I worked for Jake Dunlap at Scaled for a couple of years, and then started my own consulting business about a year ago.
Amazing. Yeah. A lot of CEOs think that, oh, like we have a marketing problem, I'll just fire our current CMO and put a new one in. And then they fire that CMO 12 or 18 months later too. And part of it is a lot of it is because of how the go-to-market is set up, how the financial planning happens. And maybe we'll get into that in a little bit about what we solve at Passetto. But
yeah.
There are a lot of capable, talented CMOs that get put in roles in marketing that are set up to fail. You could say the same thing about any team in the go-to-market. And I have come to the conclusion that CEO, CFO are the people that are going to solve this through unified go-to-market KPIs and changing the way they think about their go-to-market as a revenue factory.
Yep. Yeah, and what I noticed from experience and from doing a couple dozen consulting projects is oftentimes when the CEO asks you to do something, they're getting whispered to by the board. So if you can, your next company, Chris, will be advising the board of how to do go-to-market. Chris, so on Passetto, maybe you can talk a little bit about that background and journey that you've been on over the last 9 months or so. I'm sure there was a lot of work that went into it before that, but since officially launching, and then I'm curious on the mix of product and services, because I don't think a lot of companies are doing that. And it seems like that's an area that you're focused to.
So the premise at a high level of Passetto is to give B2B executives all the data that they need in one place to be able to make large strategic decisions, not debating attribution of one fucking deal, looking at your entire go-to-market on one screen and saying, these are the three biggest opportunities in our go-to-market. How are we going to solve them? Let's put together a plan. Let's go. And then being able to monitor those metrics consistently aligned to actual business growth and enterprise value rather than these departmental level metrics where marketing's optimizing for leads, probably not even a cost efficiency metric. Marketing doesn't even understand how much money, like someone that's reporting on CAC in the demand gen department doesn't understand how much is being spent on sales, how much is being spent on operations and technology and events and all the programs outside of digital. And they're coming up with a unit economics equation that doesn't match anything close to what the financial team is seeing. And so the premise is to create a data layer that connects the CRM data. And then we learned in the future, oh, it's not just the CRM data that you need. You actually need all the data from the accounting system too. And then you need to unify financial data and go-to-market data to not only measure the effectiveness of your go-to-market, how fast are we growing, what are the conversion rates, but also the efficiency of the go-to-market. How much does it cost us to get a pipeline dollar? How much sales expenses does it cost to close a new logo? What's the ROI on our post-sale team in terms of incremental ARR from our base? And being able to look at it at that level, which takes out the details of attribution, takes out the details of segmenting by geography or customer segment or something like that, and looks at the entire business overall to align the executive team on this is our overall performance. This is how we perform against benchmarks. These are our biggest opportunities inside of the go-to-market or the biggest risks in our plan next year that we need to be able to address. And then all of a sudden, you have a very clear sense between the CMO, CRO, CEO, CFO, revenue ops leader, other people on the executive team aligned on the performance. A lot of people on the executive team question the performance of marketing, but don't really know how to measure it to show it that way.
Right.
And so this just gives an opportunity. And there are some instances where CEOs or CFOs think their marketing isn't performing, and we run the data and the marketing is. And in both cases, I think it's a really good thing to be able to align the teams on objective data that's delivered by a third party. Now, what we've learned is that the reason this problem hasn't been solved yet is because you can't solve it with only software. Yeah. It's not only about serving up the data to people. It's actually about helping people make decisions about how they deploy $10 million in budget or $50 million in budget next year. You need to have a channel into that stakeholder. And so there's a ton of BI tools. Companies have, they build out a Power BI or a Tableau dashboard. They have a million different things on it. There's a bunch of custom SQL stuff that runs that breaks and then they don't know what to do. And one department doesn't trust the data of another department and both teams are measuring it differently and none of the data matches up to the finance details. And it's a total fucking mess. It's not actually about the data that's being processed. It's one, having confidence in your data, having a structure that aligns all the data and unifies all the data together, which most companies don't have. And then lastly, being able to look at that data and make confident decisions around big transformational changes. And I think that's what companies really need to be looking at. Not often are we hearing conversations about moving $5 million in marketing budget from one place to another next year, or reallocating $7 million that we used to spend on customer success, slowly consolidating that to just one layer of account management and moving that money somewhere entirely different in the go-to-market.
Right.
And only the CEO and the CFO, every department leader is just begging for more budget because all they need to do is hit their goal. So it's like, how can I get the most money to hit whatever my goal is? So marketing's looking for money for MQLs, sales is looking for as many headcount and potentially SDRs as they can get so they can get the right amount of meetings and they have enough people in the capacity. And so everybody, and RevOps is vying for all of their people so they can do a bunch of ad hoc, low value work usually. And so every department leader is just vying for more budget to be able to do more stuff and try to hit their goals. Only the CEO and the CFO have the view of being able to see how are we going to move this money from one place to another, like they're managing a massive portfolio, which is what you're doing as a CFO. You're managing a developed company, $100 million company, you're managing a $50 million a year portfolio. You want to get a return on that stuff. You want to get a better return next year than you did last year.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure people really look at it that way right now. And so the blending of services and technology is necessary to actually, when you clearly define the problem, the blending of services and technology is necessary in order to solve this problem.
Absolutely. Chris, I'm curious from some of your customer engagements. You're doing something novel and new. You're advising CEO, CFO, but also bringing that business and marketing, go to market skill set. Are there any go to analogies or stories or examples that you're using to explain this new approach with your customer base or prospects?
Um, there's really not, I don't think there's that much to explain. The core issue is that there's a disconnect between the go to market data and the finance data. And so the CEO and the CFO can see, hey, our growth rate's slowing down. Hey, our CAC has gone way up. Hey, our NRR or GRR are going down. We can see those metrics just by looking at the finance data, but we can't drill into that, figure out exactly why that's happening, and then put a plan in place to move that metric in the right direction. So there's a disconnect between those two things where the executive team doesn't have the visibility to understand why it's happening and what to do about it. So they rely on the bottoms up recommendations from director level or manager level people that don't have the context around the business performance. So
Right.
all the recommendations that are coming up don't see our growth rate is slowed by 50% and our CAC has doubled. And so they're bringing their recommendations without understanding that those business dynamics. That's what's happening in these companies. And so executives are left saying, we don't know what to do about this, which generally leads to inaction or indecision. They don't change anything. Let's start next year's financial plan with the same budget that we had from last year, the same percentage allocation of 40% to marketing and 60% to sales. Let's not question any of our previous year assumptions, even though our business metrics aren't working. And then they roll into next year with basically the same plan they had last year. And that's fine when you're rolling and all your metrics are on track to make incremental improvements and keep doing that. But many companies need more of a transformational change right now, specifically related to unit economics.
Sure, sure. So it sounds like for the most part, you're getting traction and your main stakeholders, the CEO of these companies,
A
to
lot of
really get
go-to-market
alignment.
leaders too. There are smart, forward-thinking go-to-market leaders, CMOs and CROs that recognize that they want to optimize their investments against the financial metrics, and they don't have that visibility either. They want to be able to make the decisions that impact growth rate and CAC and go to market efficiency just as much as the other of the CEO and the CFO do.
Yeah,
And so it can benefit go to market leaders in the exact same way by just having the visibility to connect that and also having a clear understanding about your overall performance.
sure. Chris, last question. So you're bringing a combination of the technology, the data layer, business intelligence with consulting and advisory. And because it's people, process, and then technology, just the SaaS solution or the technology is not going to get the insights or outcomes and transformation that companies need. Do you see that as a bigger opportunity for SaaS companies or for other types of businesses to layer both of these together? Why or why not? And yeah, go from there.
Um, Absolutely. Although most companies, especially ones that raise VC and PE, will not do it. They'll try to outsource it to partners because they don't want 55% margin consulting on their P&L. They're not considered, and then that gets too much revenue and they're not considered a software company anymore. And so, no, like most SaaS companies aren't going to do it, even though it would be better for their customer. And so, what you see right now is software vendors that are facing decreasing GRR, sub 100% NRR. The customer success team is basically a support team. They're not experts that can help executives solve real problems with the technology. Neither are the account managers. And so, what happens is they buy this piece of tech and then they struggle to be successful, and it shows up in their post sale metrics. And so I think for two reasons. One, for innovation, that having a services layer that helps your customers really be successful and is truly invested in that helps you innovate on your product in a whole different way than just running a product marketing survey and asking what features your customers need. It's way more about how do you solve the actual problem and get the actual result, not just listening to what features people want. And then secondarily, actually getting paid money at a fair rate to be able to help your customer be successful and be able to further get, like, not guarantee, but further talk through how they're going to be successful that way. I just think a lot of people are going to pay to have a much greater likelihood of success implementing the tool and solving the problem, especially when you think about how many failed implementations across all technology and all departments and companies that happen. there are so many ABM tools that are not even getting fucking used, and they're $200,000 a year sitting there basically doing nothing.
Yeah, it's the modern version of shelfware. It's like SaaS version of shelfware these days.
Yeah, and so I think that in order to solve the specific problem we're solving at Passetto, it's necessary. I know that most of the market will not do it because they want to have an 80% margin SaaS business that gets a revenue multiple, not an EBITDA multiple. And I think that having the blend of services and technology gives us a lasting competitive advantage in the space. And additionally, I don't really think we're competing with software companies.
Right. Yeah, it's a whole different paradigm. Yeah.
I think we're competing with McKinsey. I think we're competing with Gartner. I think we're competing with Serious Decisions. The people that give executives advice about and frameworks and ideas and validation on decisions and data and insights about how to make big decisions and mitigate risk in their plan. Like, that's what we're doing. We just use a technology to get there, which makes us significantly better than the alternatives. It's not even fucking close.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something we've thought about a lot, and that's the competitive positioning we're taking for now.
Awesome. Well, Chris, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining the Leader Leverage podcast. And where might folks go if they're interested in learning more about Passetto and some of the content you're putting out?
Right on. Thanks for having me. Anyone that's interested in learning more about Passetto, you can go to passetto.com. Tons of details there about what we're working on. You can feel free to reach out to me on DM on LinkedIn if you feel like we could help, or if you have any questions that I can help with. And then also feel free to check out the podcast that I host every week, the B2B Revenue Vitals podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and pretty much everywhere else.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Leader Leverage podcast. If you'd like to connect or learn more, you can find me on LinkedIn at Andrew Kappel, or you can check out and subscribe at leaderlev.com. That's www.leaderlev.com.